Cormac McCarthy's novel, The Road, narrates the journey of a man and his young son in a post-apocalyptic world traveling towards a destination they aren't even sure exists. Their path becomes fueled by determinate hope as they encounter forces that work to extinct the human race. The father and son meet few groups of survivors along the way. Some of the groups are harmless and some are very dangerous. They encounter many obstacles on their journey that cause them to question humanity and what is considered good and evil. Cormac McCarthy was born as Charles McCarthy in Providence, Rhode Island in 1933. As a distinguished author of multiple novels and plays, he earned up to more than 10 different awards throughout his career. His works tend to reflect an individual trying to survive in a bleak and hostile American frontier. A violent, deteriorating social order also threads among these stories. Among all his novels, McCarthy ultimately illustrates the horrors within the fundamental nature of humans that most are afraid to admit. McCarthy did not enjoy parading himself before the public, therefore he drew little attention to his presence until in his later years. He sold thousands of copies of his work and was labeled as the best unknown novelist in America. He spent most of his life traveling the world with grants he received from the awards he earned. As for family, Cormac was born as one of 6 children to his mother and grew up considerably rich only because everyone else was very poor. His first marriage was with a woman named Lee Holloman, who moved with him to what is quoted as a shack with no heat and running water outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. In 1962, they had a son named Cullen, and the couple lived a difficult life. Because his dedication to his love of writing far outweighed his many matters in his own life, his first wife soon left him when she realized Cormac only demanded more of her support, regardless of the difficulties she was having. Upon a trip to Ireland earned from an award he won, he met an English woman named Anne Delisle, who was the dancer and singer on the ship he aboard, and married her in England. He continued his travels and returned to America with his wife in 1969. The two lived in absolute poverty as well, to the point that they could only shower in a lake. Despite this, McCarthy wasn't looking for anything to relieve their destitute circumstances. In 1976, McCarthy separated with his second wife and moved to live in Texas. The two divorced in 1981. In 1997, Cormac married his third wife, Jennifer Winkley, and later had another son named John, who he dedicated The Road to. The two later divorced in 2006. The biographical lens is a form of literary criticism that analyzes literature through a lens that considers the writer's life experience, race, gender, class, identity, and etc. For the audience to view an author's work through this lens, they're able to comprehend the literature at a higher level. This lens brings life to the novels, making it more than just a story on paper. The psychological lens, as a part of the biographical criticism, approaches a reading that uses psychological analysis as a means of better understanding characters, their relationships, and the author's motivation on the text. Cormac McCarthy's life experience, such as poverty, violence, and chaos he both lived through and witnessed in his travels, fueled his imagination for creating his stories. So it is quite fitting to apply the biographical and psychological lens to his work, The Road. As quoted from a biography on Cormac McCarthy, in 2003, while sleeping at an El Paso motel with his son, McCarthy imagined the city in 100 years, fires up on the hill and everything being laid to waste. He wrote 2 pages covering the idea. 4 years later in Ireland, he would expand the idea into his 10th novel, The Road. It follows a lone father and his young son traveling through a post-apocalyptic America, hunted by cannibals. Many of the discussions between the father and the boy were verbatim conversations McCarthy had had with his son. After applying the selected lens to The Road, we can see that his imagination of a future El Paso motel allowed for the creation of the setting of The Road. This 2003 experience was able to influence a work he finished years after. McCarthy's 3 failed marriages possibly led to the creation of the mother in The Road. In The Road, the mother was portrayed as someone who could not find it in herself to continue living with the man and his son in a hopeless world. Perhaps this reflects his confusion as to why 3 women in his life all decided to leave him in the end. McCarthy's own son, John McCarthy, was also a character that strongly influenced the plot of The Road. As mentioned, their conversations were directly put into the novel to fuel dialogue between the father and the son. Spending time with John on this trip in 2003 was what caused Cormac to create a character that was very important to the father who traveled the road. There's another connection that also shows the application of the lens. This would be McCarthy's messy life dragged by poverty and a selfish regard towards his love of writing. As introduced before, his marriages all essentially failed because his real lifestyle was poor and chaotic. In The Road, the setting was a post-apocalyptic wasteland that the man and his son trudged through. This parallel once again shows how much his personal life affected the creation of his own work.